Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that Smooth Sack Summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN. The Manscaped Performance 5.0 Ultra has everything you need to prepare that summer bod. Inside this package, you'll find the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0. Their 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little bit off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. So remember, get 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 210B of Tales with TR. Let's get right into it. My next guest hails from beautiful Ottawa, Ontario, has had a long, successful career in broadcasting since graduating from Algonquin in 1995, having worked for both TSN and Sportsnet. Highlights of his awesome career include working the 2010 Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver and winning a Gemini Award for Best Sports Feature in 2011. If you're into video games, you may have heard him calling play-by-play for the NHL series in the EA Sports universe, of course. And these days, he also is the voice of the Abbotsford Canucks, the American Hockey League, as well as co-host of the popular podcast Clearing the Crease. He is a versatile voice, a remarkable reporter, a brilliant broadcaster, a proud podcaster. He wears a cool lid and played hockey as a kid. Wouldn't you know, he's from Ontario. He's not a fool and aced broadcasting in school. Man alive, he graduated in 95. He doesn't build forts, but he covers many sports. He's a shaker and mover. Did the Olympics in Vancouver. Folks, I couldn't get down the mountain because I had one dull ski. Please welcome to the show. It's James Cybulski. How you doing, James?
TR, how are you, man? Thanks for that. That is, far and away the best intro I've ever had for a podcast. So thank you.
Well, you deserve it. And speaking of podcasts, how did you get? I mean, I'm going to be all over the map here because I want to know a lot about your origin story here. But a lot of people are going to want to know about the pod you do now. And they're also going to want to know. There's my dad. One sec. Senior. James Cybulski. What are you up to?
Oh, I just dropped off some magazines for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm live on the air. Here he is,
Hi,
my
Dad.
That's it. Hey.
How are you?
Yeah, I just came in. It's 25 degrees here. So we're going down by the ocean now anyway, myself and my wife.
Okay.
We finally got some heat. We finally got some heat across this country. We finally got a little taste of it here on the West Coast too. So we're finally.
It's beauty. So senior comes by and just opens my door and drops off magazines.
Oh, yeah.
When I say like I have a Rolling Stone subscription and Uncut and Mojo, I don't really have those. It's him. He drops.
I was waiting for like no more copies of Reader's Digest or anything.
He rips. No, this is it. For like, he's had Rolling Stone since '72. Covers ripped off because they're used on our wall at home.
That's Uncut magazine, Mojo from London.
Uncut.
And I also get this one. Now, True West. I love it.
Oh, look at that one.
Oh, yeah. I got to go anyway, James.
Okay,
Nice talking about
see you later, Senior.
What about no copies of Swank?
Oh yeah, this is wild. When I played in Colorado Springs, he came down to watch. Then he came a couple months later. Didn't go to the game. He fucked off out to it was somewhere north of Denver. It was where Doc Holliday's grave. Yeah, he's right into that stuff. Anyway,
I went to Tombstone, man. I remember years ago when my oldest daughter was she was maybe 6 months old. My ex-wife and I, she would sometimes travel with me, depending on where I'd go. And I was covering the 2009 NBA All-Star game. So it's like, hey, we're in Phoenix. Why don't we do that? So we come down and we were going to go for a few days. We were going to go up to the Grand Canyon, but go figure it snowed. And so the highway was closed. So it's like, well, what are we going to do now for the next few days? So I thought, hey, you know what? Tombstone's about a 3-hour drive. And I mean, I love that movie. And come on, I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So yeah, we drove down, checked out Boot Hill, walked around the OK Corral. It was, so your dad and I would get along.
That's wild. And bikes, it's a similar story. I went last year to drop a puck at the Rapid City Rush game in the Coast.
Okay.
And in November, and 15 minutes away from Rapid City is Mount Rushmore on one side. 15 minutes from that, kind of adjacent is Deadwood, like the real city of Deadwood.
Yeah.
So I went down and checked that out.
Show.
That was quite wild. And there was one lady with cowboy boots, fit the part, could have been from the 1880s herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the only one in there. And I went in and she goes, "Hey, Ted Hitchcock, Shoresy." I said, "No way. What are the odds?"
Come on.
Deadwood, South Dakota.
And she recognizes you.
She did. She had her husband watch the show all the time. And she didn't know anything about hockey, didn't know what offsides was, but we had a great chat.
But she knew you. Oh, that's funny.
Wild. But when the show took off in the States, I never expected that. But hey, you
saw Mount Rushmore. Did you stop by Mount Rushmore as well?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
I hear it's smaller than you expect.
It is, but being smaller, I think for me, yes, it is smaller than I thought, but it also accentuates the massive creativity and talent that they had because it's smaller. You can see when you're close to it, you can see the specifics of the face and everything.
Oh, wow.
Like I just find, smaller to me made it more magical. It was more personal. It was right. You're like, oh, I see how they did that. Wow. It must have, it looked realistic, right? It's like, okay, that's where they went. That's how they did it. It still must have been, I don't know how you'd undertake something like that, but it was breathtaking for sure. For sure, breathtaking. Yeah.
Imagine somebody carving your face into a mountain.
There's so much to unpack. Imagine carving the face. Imagine it being the face that's carved.
Yeah.
Imagine being the people that were kind of working on it, because it wasn't just one person up there carving.
No. Those are the types of jobs that a lot of people die on working, right? They say that it's a hell of a piece of finished product, but the effort and the scope of the project is crazy.
Yeah. And then, of course, the people that did die, you're like, how'd you die? Like carving a nose in a side of a mountain. It seems a little bit, little Julie can't eat anymore. Why? Well, your father fell off a scaffold and...
Yeah. You're at the pearly gates, or you're at the pit of fire. It's like, what are you doing here? What happened to you? I was carving out an orbital bone, and
in a mountain.
I took a fall.
What about? Are you the type that would do the skywalk at CN Tower?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Hats off.
Yeah,
I'm just in awe.
You know what? I'll say this though, as a kid, I was a total chicken shit when it came to going on rides.
Yeah, you'll hang off the side of the CN Tower? What happened? Okay.
I don't know. Like, if push came to shove, I think I'd do it. But I don't. Maybe not. I just think that I don't know. It took a long time to finally overcome going on like the Zipper and some of those crazy rides, and going to the Gloucester Fair as a kid and going to Canada's Wonderland. I remember I was like 8 years old going for the first time. I didn't go on a single ride. My younger sister, she's on the double loop roller coasters and all that. I'm watching my entire family go on. My mother, my father, my two sisters, and I'll just wait here at the fence. I had no jam back then.
What caused the jam? There must have been a life-changing moment when you were 13 or 14. No,
puberty. I don't know. Like
puberty.
I don't know. I don't think there was anything hits. You know what? I don't think it was anything. I don't know. I guess I'd probably edibles. All things that nothing. Yeah. There's nothing. There's no eureka moments. It was just all of a sudden. I think it was 13. And it was like, all right. I think it's I guess it's time to grow up a little. My set dropped. I don't know. Like just something along those lines.
Would you skydive or bungee jump, or have you done those things?
I haven't gone skydiving, but I often thought I'd like to do it at some point, and it's just maybe a matter of doing it. But but I haven't. But it's not like it's not like I say that yes, I'd like to try it, but it's not like I've really taken the initiative. There was a guy actually a couple of years ago. a guy I knew a little peripherally, and he was like, "Hey, listen, we get these groups. You'd be interested?" And it's like, "Oh, okay, I'll think about it." But think about it.
If you have the balls, JC, to get up there and do it, I would do it. Like I don't even have. I would pass out as the door opened on the plane, and I wish I was kidding. I'm not exaggerating. But if I could get up there and fall out of a plane and have that feeling of looking, I don't think I could pass it up. If you've got the balls, you should do it. Please, and remember me when you do it. You're going to do it at some point. You've got the human gift of being able to do it and jump out of the side of a plane at 35,000 feet. More power to you.
So you're a dad as well, right? And so I feel like I want to wait till the kids are a little more independent. And that way, that if the ripcord doesn't,
Speaking of falling out of a nose on the side of a mountain, can you imagine? Well, sorry, Daddy's not with us. Why? He jumped voluntarily out of the side of a plane. Come on.
And he forgot the parachute.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, 2009 World Juniors, Canada was hosting. It was in Ottawa. And they did the Canadian team. So that was my assignment at TSN and for several years, where I would go and I would travel with the team and go overseas and spend a month with the World Juniors. And so I did that from probably around 2004 to 2009. And it was a great, I loved the experience. It was fun. And, it's kind of pre-kids for the most part. And so it was just, you're basically by yourself over the Christmas holidays, but I loved it. It was great to see the world, traveling to Europe and all that. But Ottawa was hosting the one year. The Canadian teams made. Pat Quinn was the head coach for that year, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a team that had PK Subban, John Tavares, and Jordan Eberle's on that team. So they do this basic training, kind of team building for a few days up at CFB Petawawa, which is a military base.
Yeah,
about an hour and 40 minutes outside up in Petawawa. And that was about 40 minutes to where my parents had retired up to. So I had my dad come hang out with me for a couple days while we were hanging on the base. And so one of the activities that they had the team do was do this base jump, which was the psychological height of fear, I believe, is 4 stories. So what they would do is everybody would climb up on this tower, and they would harness you. They kind of put a harness on you, but you'd stand over the edge. And it was a little bit about building trust and also kind of overcoming a fear, this psychological height of fear, where you go up and you got to look over and you got to jump. And it's kind of that point where psychologically for the human mind, it's like, ooh, like, I don't know, can I do this kind of thing? And so I went, like the whole team did it. And then, they were like, hey, why don't the one reporter who was up there, like, why don't you go, Cybulski? And it's like, okay, my dad, of course, like, go, right? And camera guy kind of egging me on because this is going to make for a great shot. And so I run up to do it. And so I did it and overcome it. But it was funny when Pat Quinn did it. And Pat was a big guy, right? Yeah. And he jumps, and the safety harness clip snapped when he jumped. Now, he stayed on and he kind of rappelled, but my camera guy, and this was in the early days of high definition, photography and all that, but he saw the clip like snap and go flying off into the snow. And so this is like right before Christmas, but like Quinn kind of jumps. He had no idea, right? But it was like, and they kind of, they pull him back at the other end to unfasten him, and it's like, oh my God.
Now that I know that.
There's a safety clip.
Now that I know that, not that I would have been doing that anyway, I'll never ever do anything of the sort. Now, listen, I don't want to steal your interview, but just to slightly relate.
Yeah.
2001, I'm at Dallas Stars camp, and we do the team building stuff. And one of them is that it's like, there's these like telephone pole looking things. Mm-hmm. That's what they were. And I guess maybe it was the 4 stories, whatever was one. It was supposed to be some threshold of fear. So you went up, and from the first one to the second one, you could walk. You had a harness on the whole way, and there was levels. First one to the second one is just 2 telephone poles with like one connecting them, and you're kind of you're tight roping it. The next one, the ones that are connecting, but they're like tied to chains, so it's wobbly a little bit. And then the next one is like a actual tightrope. Now, you're in something.
Yeah, you're
I
fast.
told,
You're locked in.
yeah, you're fastened in, but I really, really didn't want to do it. Now I go down there, and I was just, it's a long, long story, but I was excited to get out of Montreal finally. And I just didn't go back to camp. I had my own, without anything against the Habs. That was its
Yeah.
own little thing in a box.
Yeah.
But
Time to
without
turn the
getting into
page.
that, yeah, I finally went down and I was like, okay, new start. So I was in really, really good shape. I'd spent 3 years in the American League for the most part, with a little bit of time in the show. And I still went to rookie camp. I remember Bob Gainey, and I said, look, I'll go to rookie camp. I'll do whatever it takes to get some time on this team and whatever I need to do. So I went down and I fought John Erskine 6 times in one game, 6, like back to back to back to back to back to back. My
6 games.
Well, it was just, I got out there. I was throwing my weight around a little bit, not to pick on younger guys, because some of them had either they were all like a year or two younger than me. Some of them, Steve Ott had just been drafted, so I was like 4 years older.
Yeah, that was a salty team at that period.
It was a very salty team. So the boys that play in Utah together, most of the guys on there played in Utah. So like I ran at a guy, Dan Jasemski, I think his name was, and Erskine came in, and I was like, okay. And then we fought again. The weird thing was he was my roommate. I didn't know him going into and then we fought again and again and again. And it was just like Bob Basson finally came over and said, dude, like, that's it. You guys don't need to do this. Because you're in camp. There's no even real reps there. There are, but they're not putting you in the penalty box. So anyway, I wanted to prove a point, I guess. It was a little much. But after all that, so in other words, I was down there ready to do whatever, full of piss and vinegar. I just fought Erskine, who was as tough as anybody in camp and was like dying to get into the NHL. And anyway, we got to do this team building. I'm like, fuck, I don't want to do it. And I see the heights and I'm going, no. And I'm immediately like, I guess nowadays I could just say, look, this gives me anxiety and not do it. But I'm not laughing at that proposition. I'm just saying it would have been completely different, because I was literally, I was like passing out before we did. I said, I know I can't do this. I know I can't. But there was like, say, 52 people in camp, and it came down and they said, well, if nobody else, we'll tell you at the end. Sure enough, everybody else did it. There was some people tentative. I get up there. I got from the one pole to the other. I like screeching. I got to the next segment. I wrapped my hands around the pole, and I freaked out. I was hyperventilating. A girl that worked there had to come up and rescue me and put me on her back. And I came to, and I remember Bob Gainey. I'm looking down. He was there for some reason. I don't know why. It's not like GMs come to these things, but he was there for some reason. And he said, hey, there's nothing, you're all safe. I said, well, if I'm so safe, Bob, why am I wearing a fucking helmet? And they came up and they got me down to the ground. And then I realized I was screeching. I was bawling. It was like back to like hyperventilation when I was 7 years old. So I came home here after I hurt my ankle, got accepted for firefighting school. I couldn't rappel down the building. I really couldn't. I go into shock, whatever it would be, but I just cannot possibly do it. It's not me wanting to. I just can't do it. That was a long way around it, but it kind of related to your story.
So you struggle with heights then?
Struggle would be an understatement. I go up on a ladder, man, and I start get woozy. Planes aren't good, but for some reason they're the best of the bunch. Maybe it's stats in my head. I just go, but each. I used to be taking half an
You don't have to sit
Ativan.
next to the window, right? Like you don't necessarily have to sit next to the window. So
no, I don't.
Kind of have a little bit of ignorance is bliss when you're on a plane, right?
I've heard O-Dog talk about it. I don't know O-Dog. I've talked to him a few times, but I've heard him talk about it, and I'm scared like that. Like, I don't like it, but I take an edible now. Like I said, it used to be Ativan, but I used to hate that. I'm glad weed became legal, because the Ativan would make me feel almost hungover. It would almost give me anxiety when it wore off, and I just didn't like it. And now there's certain strains of like weed or that I can, not just that, but I got to say that's usually the best, if not a couple of shots of whiskey.
Not to go,
but that's
not that anybody wanted to hear us to figure out the medical system, but how many people, and it doesn't matter whether they're seniors or young people or middle-aged or whatever, but the idea of kind of straying from sort of chemical drugs to using forms of cannabis to cope, to deal with whether it's pain or dealing with anxiety or whatever, right? And I mean, not that I've gone down the road of microdosing, but man, there are a lot of people out there that really swear by the benefits that they're seeing.
I
from
do.
it.
Dude, I do. I talked to Riley Cote. I had him on here about 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And like sometimes I'll get up in the morning, microdose, I'll take 1/4.
Mhm.
Now we're talking about mushrooms for those that don't know.
Yeah.
I find weed very therapeutic. And sometimes I like to smoke a joint and go to a movie and get stoned.
Mhm.
I just like that there's
Yeah,
different options.
there's a social aspect to it. Yeah,
Totally, right? I find I drink less when I'm doing it. It's less of a hangover. But I like now that it's legal here. At least we're in Canada. I guess everybody knows that listening, but some of you aren't. But I like that you know what you're getting now. Like I didn't even know what sativa to indica was. Now I get these different strains. I'm like, okay, this is going to be good if I have a podcast. This is going to be good after a sports game. This is going to be good before.
This is good to go to bed, and this is
Totally.
if I want to be social. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy that.
And the other thing is you go back, let's say even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and it's like, hey, do you want a brownie? They're like, okay, and you may have nothing, or you might be out cold in a corner
and who was mixing it down in the corner.
Yeah, so now at least everything is specified, in terms of dosage and what how much and like what you're actually putting in, like through the legalization. Like, yeah, okay, it's not just moonshine and hooch out the back of a truck anymore, right?
I know.
Like
and the world didn't fall down. There wasn't World War.
Yeah,
people aren't dying in the streets, right? Like whatever the stats were, they're pretty much the same.
And let's face it, like, and going into a cannabis shop now that it's legal, it's clean, it's people know what they're talking about, as opposed to, and don't get think about it. At any point, didn't matter who you bought marijuana from before, prior to legalization, it felt like almost every house you walked into or every apartment. It felt like, man, this place looks like this could be raided at any moment.
Yeah,
right? Like it just.
You're right. Honestly,
it was like, it didn't matter how nice the person was. It's like, man, it just feels like this door is going to get kicked in by a rival gang or a bunch of cops.
Well, that's exactly. And the awkward conversations. Hey, Bill, what's going on this week? Nothing much. I'm here to get my weed. If not, I would never talk to you. But hey, what's happening? Hey, you like that movie too? Looking for something in common, right?
Yeah.
You guys got
Are you watching the Cup? Are you watching the Cup right now?
Yeah.
What's the Cup?
Yeah.
I'll just take that. I'll take that blueberry.
Yeah.
Hey, I haven't seen your friend Reg anymore. He's been dead for 3 years. Oh yeah. Okay. Just give me that strawberry stuff.
Yeah. So before I go, we have on for 20 minutes. I said I'd have you for 30. I got to find out about a few things.
I got time.
Clearing the crease. I do, because I really enjoy it. How did you guys get together? Did you guys know each other first?
I didn't really know Kami all that well. I'd interviewed him a couple times, and obviously familiar with him from his playing days. And Razor, we had crossed paths in Toronto when I was a reporter with TSN and The Score in those days, living in Toronto. He got traded from Boston to Toronto. And so he was a Leafs goalie at a time that I was a Leafs reporter. So we had we knew each other and had kind of, not that we had stayed in touch a whole lot over the years, but we had I always thought we had a decent rapport and got along pretty well with Razor. And it was kind of random to where I got a call from a couple of guys, now our producers, had reached out, and they said, look, we've put together this hockey podcast, and we need a host, and it's with a couple of former players, Mike Commodore, Andrew Raycroft, and would you be interested? And I was like, well, I know Kami's personality. He likes to have fun. And Razor I had known for going back, 10, 15 years. And so it was like, oh, this sounds easy in the sense that, and when I say easy, it's, it's easy to kind of, with certain personalities, to just have a conversation, especially when you know somebody, right? Like, I think when you work with somebody, when you trust somebody, it makes it so much easier. Now, in the virtual world, ever since COVID, we've all learned how to discover how StreamYard and Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these virtual meeting sites that we do it. And so, in a lot of ways, it's just kind of plug and play. And we've been fortunate enough that Bodog's been our title sponsor for the last 2 years, and they continue to renew us. So I guess we're clearly fooling the right people. But it's been great. And, between Kami and Razor and, having a chance to, I think the one thing that really stands out with me is just how likable an individual that Kami is, because the guests that are willing to come on, like Terry, like everybody has a podcast now, right? And what blows me away are the individuals that are willing to come on our show, because it's such a competitive marketplace, right? And I'm sure you get a million people asking you to come on to their shows and this and that. I mean, you could just do podcasts all day, right? With the amount of, requests and people asking.
I feel bad. I got like 50 on backup. I don't know what to say to people anymore, But anyway, we'll get into that in a second.
Well, time is currency, right? And it's not about being disrespectful, because, here we are asking for people to come on as well. But I'm just amazed that what Kami's been able to, using going into his phone book and asking former teammates. We've had Steven Stamkos come on. We've had Rod Brindamore in the middle of training camp. We've had Martin St. Louis. It's pretty remarkable, just some of the names that are willing to come on. And I just think that those guys that really, let their guard down and tell stories, right? That's the root of what a great podcast is. And I think having a guy like Kami and Razor, the fact that both those guys played, it's really easy for me in the sense that I just have to, basically put the ball on a tee for those guys and let them kind of tell stories and relate. And that it's been a lot of fun. It's never work once we hit the record button. It's a lot of fun. It's probably one of the easiest jobs I've ever done. And I say that just because there's no stress, and it's just easy working with those guys. So Clearing the Crease podcast, powered by Bodog, and you can find it on Spotify and YouTube. And thanks for the plug, and thanks for coming on. You were great. Oh my God, the stories you told, when you're playing up in BC, when you're playing in BC, man, outside of Williams Lake, you were playing in Quesnel, right?
In Quesnel, yeah. That's how I know the area, and I'm going back actually July 5th. Can't wait. I just got a call yesterday to do the Prince George Cougars summer event, whatever. I think it might be golf. I'm not great at golf. I do these charity events. Yep. I'm good enough to hit it at these things. But and I'm going to stay out for a couple of days and go back up to Quesnel. Any excuse, it's just so far. Not only that, I got to go all the way across the country, and then it's a trek to get there from Vancouver, right? But hey,
my wife is from Williams Lake, so we do that drive.
I didn't know that.
We
do
that
there.
drive.
It's the same size, same attitude, same sort of people. I love it. It reminds me of Newfoundland in many, many ways. And they're just the same kind of people. I remember getting to Quesnel, being so nervous to go there, and then fitting in right away. Well, it took a little bit, but right away is in a month. I was there for 2 years. And then, looking back now, I'm like, wow, all the places I've been, like it couldn't have been a better fit for me and for the Quesnel Millionaires. And I didn't, something bigger would have probably blown my mind a little bit. Reminded me of home, right? And the people, lots of transplanted Newfoundlanders out there
Quesnel's
working.
Nice, man. Yeah.
It is nice. Yeah. I stayed a couple of summers. BC in general, I really have some good memories. So listen, but and you explained that right. It's such a privilege to be able to do these things and get paid for them. But none of us could have seen podcasting coming, but you were in broadcasting, so you had that. When you were growing up, I know you played hockey. Like, did you want to be a broadcaster or a hockey player or either? Maybe an astrophysicist. How the fuck do I know?
No, I think I wanted to be a broadcaster. That was pretty early.
And it was in Ottawa.
It was in Ottawa where I grew up. My dad was a cop. He was a Metro cop. He worked with the Ottawa Police, and as a kid, he was a diehard Bruins fan. And I didn't love the Bruins necessarily, but he taught me to hate the Habs. And this is you think about, like, I'm a 74, right? So this is the time, the late 70s, early 80s, where like Montreal was winning everything. Yeah. Right. And so the Habs fans were kind of the obnoxious fans in those days, because it was just, we win, like, hey, Les Glorieux, and we're still talking about Les Glorieux, not 30 years without a cup, right? Like every other Canadian team. And so at that time, but I would go on Saturday mornings when I was about 4. My parents would take me down to the Sandy Hill Arena in Ottawa, and my dad played in the Police League. And honestly, like, Terry, the Police League, these were guys that worked with each other, and this was like Slapshot. And, guys were fighting. These cops were, blood. This is Saturday morning, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And these cops are throwing down, sticking each other. Just a different time, right?
Yeah.
The glass was low, pucks whistling into the crowd, fans getting hit. Like
Garrett's
it was just
in the rink.
Oh, it was nuts, right? It's just a different time. And I was honestly, as a kid, I was terrified. I was terrified of the sport just because everybody was coming off in a pile of blood and missing teeth. And these are guys that got to work together, right? These are guys that are supposed to have each other's back.
If these guys are doing it, what about teams that are meant to hate each other?
Yeah, exactly, right? And so I remember when I was about 4, my dad saying, okay, you're going to play hockey. And I'm like, I'm not playing hockey. And he's like, you're going to play hockey? There's no way I'm playing. He's like, you can play hockey or you can wear a dress. And I was like, I'll wear a dress. This is a story that my parents still tell me to this day. And it's like, okay, I'll take the dress. And anyway, I guess cooler heads prevailed. And
you can skate. So you did play some, right?
Yeah, I did play. I played. I played about 10 years. I played. Did the years in hockey school. Played novice. Played 3 years of Adam, a couple of years of Pee Wee, and then played up to Bantam. And at that point, it was a discovered part-time job, and then drinking and all the other stuff. And I just realized. I think I would just realize that I was a better talker than I was an athlete. But I loved the sport, but I eventually grew to fall in love with the sport, collecting O-Pee-Chee hockey cards and the sticker books and just watching it. And I fell in love with Gretzky, right? Like Gretzky at that time, as he's blowing up, I had an aunt who gave me an Oilers toque, scarf, and mitts when I was about 5 years old, just as they were breaking into the NHL. And I was like, okay, that'll be my team. And lo and behold, I'm focusing on Gretzky and, in those days, just going into the box scores every day after, when the newspaper would come in the afternoon and just, looking at those long box scores. And the two that always stood out were just like checking out how many points Gretzky had. And then like the length of the penalty minutes. And anytime the Battle of Quebec went down or it was a Bruins and Habs game, right? And just, oh my gosh, look at all these fights. Like, look at how long this box score is. So that's where I really kind of fell in love with it. Just, the stats, the watching on Saturday night, Bob Cole, and obviously it was a lot of Leafs games in those days, and the Leafs weren't very good in the 80s, but there was just an energy and a magic to it that I wanted to be a part of it. And so I just always knew that was what I wanted to do, and kind of followed that path out of high school and went to college and went to Algonquin and did a ton of volunteer work for community television. Rogers had a community television station, so I did a lot of volunteer work. It was funny at the time where Tom Green, if you know the comedian Tom Green,
course,
he was basically, he had the Tom Green show, which was, basically the Canadian Wayne's World, if you will, and he had a whole cult following, and I would, do all the, I'd do all this, whatever sports opportunities would pop up. So I did Ottawa 67's games. I called minor hockey. I called ringette games. I called karate tournaments, touch football, like any opportunity to get reps that I would. And here I was 18, 19, 20, just, conceding on some of those parties at that age to try to get that experience. And, got a job at a classic rock station in Ottawa. And then that parlayed into a news talk station. And after a few months, and then my big break came in, in the fall of '98, where I got a call from Anthony Shoshone, who was running the Score television network at the time, or Headline Sports, and said, "Hey, do you want to move to Toronto for $35,000 a year at the time?" And it was like, I'm in, right? And and the journey began.
I didn't know the classic rock part of that story.
I
wow.
worked at Shea 106.
I would have really enjoyed that. I dated a girl who left here and got into Algonquin in '95.
Oh, no kidding.
I hung out there, and then I got drafted to Montreal right after it happened. So I used to drive down there. It's in the Nepean, right? Or no. It's not in,
exactly.
I see. I just, again, not that I've been there since, but I used to drive down, spend the week, and I went. Her friends on. I spent a good part of the summer often living the university life in and around there. Just would have missed you. Not that we would have known each other, but I know the time and I know the culture.
Dan O'Toole, who had worked for years with Jay Onright on SportsCenter, he was another Algonquin guy. We had just missed each other by, I want to say, about a year or so. But yeah, they had an 8-watt FM license at the time. This is 30 years ago, and we got the broadcast rights to carry Ottawa 67's games in those days. And so you talk about a learning experience about learning to be a reporter and dealing with athletes and coaches and bosses. I got a chance to ride the bus for a few times with Brian Kilray. Right.
Wow. So riding the bus in junior is an experience not everybody gets to. And I often say, I go like, it's a whole thing in itself. Riding the buses in junior, guys who have done it know what I'm talking about. It's a whole culture on its own. There's a lot to unpack. I don't mean bad or good. I mean, it's just an experience. Like by the time I got to the American League and people were complaining about travel, I was like, yeah, try playing in the Western League when Brandon is 30 hours away. Not that I'm just mean even busing anywhere. A lot of them don't know that feeling now. But
no, and these days, Terry, and we're of the same vintage as I mentioned earlier. Guys would smoke, like you could, the whole front of the bus, like Killer had a cigar. Yeah. I think Bert O'Brien, his assistant, he had a cigar. Killer's is kind of his helpers, the guys who were on the home games that were kind of did the goal. They were the goal judges, or kind of fire up the lamp behind. They'd just be hacking darts. One of the Billets would ride, he'd hack a dart, and then the back of and every once in a while it was our turn as the radio guys to buy a case of beer. And Killer never expected us to buy the high end stuff, so it was like buying like Carling Light or whatever, and it's like just buy a 2-4 for the veterans. So the older guys at the back of the bus were all allowed to drink, and then but you'd stand up if you wanted to go to the washroom, like there'd be that haze of smoke, right? In some of those bars, like the Bob Gertain Arena, right? Like you just have that haze of smoke above you, right, on the bus.
People say like, oh, the NHL has changed. I'm like, yeah, there's things, but I go, it's all like you can see that happening. The whole perspective has changed. Again, it's just timing. I'm sure it's great on the buses now. It's probably safer. I just mean, remember
nobody's getting secondhand smoke.
Yeah, dude, we had a good game. It's like, of course you guys are going to get beers. Who's going to buy them? Put them back there. Young guys don't get too loaded. The other guys sit at the back. Cards, whatever. You're under our control. We can see you all. Like it was like crazy. It was
somebody threw an apple. I remember like my color commentator, the guy I went to school with, we were sitting on the bus together. Somebody thought it was funny. They fired from the back of the bus. One of the vets whipped an apple. Like an apple's like a fucking hardball, right? Somebody throwing that and pegged off my color commentator in the back of the head. And that hurts, right? And out of the blue, like boom, and he's out. And he was ready to snap, and then what the hell? And then a Killer turns around and he's like, what the, somebody threw an apple, and that Killer's screaming, knock the fuck off, right? And Killer was terrifying. He had his triple option plan, right? You can chip it off the glass, or you can fuck off, or you can fuck off. That was, you ask any player who was, coached by Killer, like that was the triple option plan.
I've heard, so those that don't know, check in Brian Kilray. He's got some unreal stories. You couldn't begin to unpack them, but he's one of the most talked about, and I've heard so many stories. I don't mean necessarily bad ones. I just mean this guy was a legend.
Oh, he was great
at the time. He was great. What we're saying, it was a culture of the time. It was no different than any other bus you got on. That's the way it was.
Yeah, and he cared, but he cared. You know what? I'll say this. Did. Like, I think there's a difference now, and in terms of how you have to parent and how you have to respond, and you hear how coaches have to deal with today's players and today's athletes. But I'll say this: like I was a kid that needed a kick in the ass.
Yeah, me too.
Right, as a report, like as a young guy, and I wasn't an athlete, but I needed a kick in the ass every once in a while, and whether it was from my dad or my mom, or whether it was from sometimes a different voice, but Brian was great for me. He taught me respect. Like I'll never forget, I was a public address announcer for half a season right before I left to go to Toronto. And so for the home games, I got the job as the 67's public address announcer. It's a game, and they were a stacked team. They won the Memorial Cup that year. And so they had Brian Campbell, Nick Boynton, Matt Zoltek was a first round pick. And so
I forgot that name.
there, and
He's a
and
good
so
player.
he was a great, and he's a cop now out in I believe in Durham region.
Good.
In the
Okay, so
Toronto
he's doing
area.
something good.
Yeah, he's doing well. Yeah, but at the time he was a first round pick, and
Fuck yeah.
but I get this. It's a 7-2 game. Ottawa's playing Oshawa. Ottawa's blowing them out, and I announced the 50-50 winner. And of all the people, and the crowd's packed. Like there's probably 7,000 fans in this place on this afternoon, and I announced like congratulations to Terry Ryan, and believe it, of all places, Terry is from Oshawa, and just like the crowd boo, right? And I just being cheeky 22-year-old Cybulski, well, they have to win something, right? And hey, kind of pop. It's a 7-2 hockey game, right? And the Generals are getting worked, and so game ends. I go down to collect my $40-50 for doing my public address announcing, and as I get downstairs, I remember Nick Boynton and Brian Campbell are leaving the arena together, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you see Killer yet?"
Oh no.
I'm like, "No, why?" And he's like, "Oh, he's pissed at you. See ya." And I'm like, "What? What did I do?" Right? And then I come around the corner, and Killer just right in front of a bunch of people, and is like, "Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up with that shit!" And they already want to kick our asses bad enough next time. They don't need your fucking voice to give them more motivation.
Yeah.
And it was like, and he kind of lectured me and chastised me, and then a minute later he's like, "Okay, now sit down and have a beer," right? And kind of had a chuckle.
No,
but
that's
in that
great.
moment, but it just taught me a lesson about being respectful, right? And I don't know if you can really get away with having those conversations as direct and as open and like that these days. But for me, I needed that, right? And then we laughed it off afterwards. But in that moment, like it was a valuable lesson that 25, 26 years later, I still remember that story. But it's also like it's be gracious in victory and be humble in defeat, and be humble, be modest, and that was Killer, right? He taught respect, and there were different ways of that.
That's a good story about the era that I try. Like I say to people, like now where everybody's job almost is to put yourself on display. I'm like, it was completely different. Like you were taught to be humble, especially in the sports world, not only the hockey world. Mm-hmm. I guess boxing was different, but that was part of it. But I don't know. Think of Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan or. I don't know, any football player of the time. And the same thing when you look at Gretzky or Lemieux, or when I was in the room, if I had ever said anything at first that was halfway self-absorbed or cocky, Lyle Odeline would let me know, or Mike King. I didn't have to because it came to that in junior, and I'd already learned that lesson, but now where it's so, like you just said, even now there's people hired to go out on Twitter and poke the other team without the coach even knowing about it. Yeah. If he taught you respect, imagine what he'd think now of some of this shit that goes on social media,
right?
Taunting the other team. And I often look at that now. I'm like, it's hard for me to get used to. If I was there in that organization, I was the GM or the coach, and you're fucking calling out the other team, and we got to go in there and play, and they can use that for motivation. Call it old school, but I find it wild. But that's the world that we live in. It's complete. That's what you do now.
And that's where it's a struggle for me as a middle-aged man at sometimes on social media to pump our own tires, because we're of that generation to kind of stay in your lane, right? Yeah. Like I just had this conversation having a beer with Davis Sanchez, who's an old buddy of mine, who Davis played in the NFL, and he's an analyst on TSN now for the CFL and the NFL. And we were just talking about that, where sometimes he lets somebody else kind of oversee his social media because of that exact reason, to pump your tires, right? Like, hey man, you gotta sell yourself and talk about how great you are. And it's
hard to do. I was at first uncomfortable with, I was uncomfortable with, even like going on Instagram and pumping it, and even like the thought of a selfie that wasn't attached to something else.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, this is the weirdest thing. And like growing up, call Mary Queen of the World, call Mount Pearl old school. But if I had taken out a camera and taking a picture and gave it like the thought of a selfie would have gotten me a punch in the face for sure. I mean, I act now. I remember being into the creative arts. Like I wrote all the time, poems and stuff. I wouldn't tell anybody about that. And I remember watching the school play going, man, I'd love to be in it. But like if anybody had asked me why not, I'm like, well, of course I'm going to get shit kicked. I'm not going to, you know, like it was so off the cusp of reality for me to even go out there and be like Romeo or one of the Mercutio or something. And yeah, I really like Mercutio, guys. Let's talk about that. Boink. Yeah. You know,
here's a wedgie while you're at it, right?
yeah. While I'm at it.
You're right. Like it is like even the other day, it was like my daughter's my daughter's birthday, and I was like, do I post something or not? Like yeah, like you know, and it's funny, like work on television, work on radio for years, you know. I mean, you work as a public figure in terms of what we do for a living, but it is sometimes a struggle to, does anybody really want to see me in a selfie or just.
And here's the world that we live in, and I'm sure because there's a large percentage. I'm talking to some people. I don't want to offend you, but it's acceptable now. Like I'll look at some people's Instagram, and it's like just their face, just pictures of their face, 50 of them in a row, and it'll be like in Argentina. I'm like, well, show me Argentina. Like, hey, happy Father's Day. What do you mean? Where's your father? Like, or, you know, like people that are, and I understand because that's the world that we live in. Yeah. But for me,
so great to see the family.
Yeah, great. Or people that are
by the beach of you,
guys or girls that are like just got a ripped body and they're like they need a reason to pose, and it says always strive for the best or like empty the tank every day, like attached to some proverb that I'm supposed to like. You know what? You're right. I really should think about eating 3 times a day, and you know you're like, well, no, because you've got nice tits and you've got nice abs or whatever. Anyway,
well, and there's the other thing where. Look, I mean, we know so much more or have a much better understanding about mental health now, right? But social media is just a giant fraud in a lot of ways, right? Because nobody's posting pictures for the most part of themselves having a tough day. Yeah. Right. Every once in a while you can see, you know, and I empathize sometimes when you see somebody kind of just pouring their soul out, maybe on Facebook. I find you see it more often.
Dude, I see that a lot. It's a catch-22 though, not to cut you off. Yeah. Please elaborate. But if I forget to say this, I get it. It's the best time for the mental health understanding and everything because we can get it out there. But social media causes a lot of it in the first place. So it's almost like you're kicking your own self in the ass. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, chasing likes is not good. And sometimes you do that being honest. So it's like, do I give more to this platform? But what's it going to take from me? Sorry, I just find it the biggest dichotomy and contradiction, and it's a fucked up world.
I think we're all guilty sometimes of like, how many likes am I getting now? Should I delete this? This is not really resonating, and it's like, man, it's just this is your own account. Like, what do you worry about, right? Like, right, and that's and you overthink it and just. Anyway, I mean, nobody takes a shirt. Nobody poses in a picture where they look like a schlub for the most part, right? Like Instagram, like everybody's looking at their bills,
looking down at your bills. Oh God! But an hour later, they'll get done up, go out back with the sunshine, put on their shades, and say, "Happy 4th of July." You know,
exactly. I just watched The Notebook again. Like all my makeup's running down, and I got puffy eyes, and it's. You know, you're gonna hold the camera up so you square the jaw. Don't look like I've got all my turkey neck.
And now you can add. See these. I got an ad coming up on Instagram today about an I guess it's AI. Everything is now where they can take your face and make it like a completely different look on your face, and they'll improve just in case you didn't look your best while you were visiting Mount St. Helens or whatever. And I'm like, but it's not real. Why would I want to do that? Can I superimpose Wayne Gretzky behind it and say that we were both? I guess I can do anything I want. But at what point does me doctoring this picture not represent what actually happened? Like, I took the picture in Mount St. Helens because I'm here. What I look, the look on my face is going to be whatever it was when you snapped the fucking picture, or we're starting to alter reality, which I guess is being done every day. I just find that, again, somehow morally responsible for me, even if it's silly, to take the picture that I was in.
And the first time of like the doctored photo for me was like in high school for grad photos. You could pay a little extra where they could kind of basically take the acne off, right?
Like
and for a lot of us, like, man, like I had acne, like, man, like I had the zit goatees and zit sideburns and like, all the outbreak, right? And so I could see like, okay, you know what, for a picture that you're probably going to have for the next few years or your graduation and all that, and like, okay, maybe I get that sort of, hey, just a little airbrush or whatever, the simplicity. But now it's like, now you've got, reconstructing your jaw.
Everything. We're adding an oracle and a gold tooth, whatever they want. It's chaos.
Yeah. He's got a second neck now. When did that grow? So,
speaking of modern technology, one of my favorite parts of modern technology, I've played video games my whole life. I've always had a PlayStation for the most part, but I've had other consoles.
Okay.
And my favorite day ever having a video game was in 1997 when I got NHL and I was called up for the first 3 games or the last 3 games the year before, and I'm in it.
You're in the game.
97. I'm in 98. I love it. My character, I'm not very good, and if you just bump me a little bit, I get in a fight, but I'm in it. And my profile, everything, I remember going, boom. That was like almost the same feeling as my first hockey card, right? And I still play, and I go on the EA Sports League and go on with my buddies, like play one position all game, and we'll play teams from all over.
Yeah.
So I love it. It's a big part of we talked about therapy or whatever. Well, for me, I get home at night, maybe half a joint, and I get on there and play with my buddies. I put the earphones on, and for two hours, I don't even look at my phone.
The chase for the Stanley Cup continues, and the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is just as hot as it is on the ice. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more, don't miss out as the Stanley Cup playoffs wind down. You can bet the over-under for any game throughout the Stanley Cup final. Or maybe you think your favorite player from the Edmonton Oilers or the Florida Panthers is feeling lucky tonight, and you want to bet on them to be an anytime goal scorer. And there's tons more you can bet on with DraftKings Sportsbook. And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN, as in the Hockey Podcast Network. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/ice for eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gambling resources. Copyright NHL 2024, all rights reserved.
Now, I want to know, how in the fuck did you come to be a commentator on a broadcaster, I guess, on the game NHL? I think you started in 21, was it? And you're still doing it. How did that come to be? And do you fucking love it?
It's the greatest gig ever. It's a total dream come true because, like you, I grew up playing video games, right? So we're of that generation of, it was an Atari for me with Pac-Man and Zaxxon and Donkey Kong. Yeah. And then, we didn't have the money for Coleco, but eventually made the jump over to Nintendo and the 8-bit. And then from, I had a Commodore 64 for a few years and played games on a computer. But
Leisure Suit Larry was my favorite.
Leisure Suit Larry. Oh yeah, we know each other. Yeah, we get along just fine. And we play Leisure Suit Larry and all those games. And then, eventually it was on to Sega Genesis and coming into playing NHL and, NHL 94, NHL 95. And then, had it on the PC in the late 90s as well. And so eventually transitioned to become a PlayStation guy all through the 2000s. And so in 2018, my buddy Davis and we were hosting a Canadian Football League podcast, and we chat all the time. And one of his best friends was the executive producer of the NHL video game and with EA Sports. And they had mentioned that we were just talking off the cuff, and he said, yeah, I guess they're auditioning a bunch of guys right now they're looking for a new broadcast team. And I was just like, can I get can you ask your buddy if I could at least audition?
Fucking believable. What a phone call.
Yeah, well, but we were just shooting the shit, and I just said, "Hey, do you think you could ask your buddy if I could just take a swing at the plate? I'd just love to audition, and man, that would be a dream come true." And he said, "Yeah, let me send him a note and see what he says." And 2 days later, I get an email from the legal team at EA, and they just said, your name's come up as a person we'd like to schedule an audition with, and so we scheduled an audition. I went in and they kind of showed some footage off a black and white monitor. And they said, just call it as you see it. Just have some fun. And, for me, obviously you get the wrestling sign here. I'm an old school wrestling nerd and always been and for me, and I should preface this, my dream getting into this business was to be a play-by-play guy. I wanted to do play-by-play. But, there's only so many opportunities that are out there, especially in Canada, where, you have 7 teams in the National Hockey League. There was a handful of CFL teams, but, you can.
And you want to get paid.
Yeah, and you want to make money, right?
High school, but you want to get paid money.
And that was it, right? And so when I was, in college and I did, volunteer work in community television, I do play-by-play for all these, but, you follow the money, right? So I got on as a reporter and working as a host at TSN and Sportsnet. And, every time I would always kind of, hey, look, I'd love to try play-by-play sometime. And, you'd mention it to the bosses, but they'd always kind of, yeah, thanks. Thanks, but no thanks kind of thing. Right. But you were always, I always felt like it was kind of dismissed. And so this opportunity to go in and audition, and I went in and called it with a bunch of energy and, cracked a couple of one-liners. And I think they obviously liked the energy I brought. And so I kind of walked out of the studio going, I don't know what just happened, but that was fun. And, a month later, I get an email and they said, look, you've made the short list. We'll make a decision in the next week to 10 days. And that's, we'll keep you posted. And, my first thought was, wow, okay, short list, that's pretty cool. And I knew that there were a bunch of play-by-play, professional play-by-play people that were auditioning for it. So I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. And then didn't hear anything for a month. And I thought, well, what, if nothing else, it was pretty cool to be shortlisted, and I'm proud of at least auditioning. And then I get another email saying a month later telling me that, look, we'd like to schedule a chemistry test with another broadcaster. And so I went back to EA and I run into Ray Ferraro there. And now Ray and I had worked together briefly at TSN, and obviously Ray had done some work as kind of the third man in the booth in previous installments of the game with EA Sports. And so I was like, okay, if Ray's here, this must be serious. I must have a legitimate shot. And, I remember Ray just kind of saying, man, just keep doing what you're doing. It sounds like you're really good at that audition. So we went in and did a little chemistry test for about 10 minutes in the booth. And, and the producers seemed to like that. And they were like, okay, well, we'll keep you posted. And then crickets again for another month. And it's like, oh, okay. And then finally I get a note and they're like, we'd like for you to come back a third time. And, so now it's like, okay, oh boy, this must be really serious now, or it's down to me and somebody else or whatever. And, I went in and one of the producers had just kind of pulled, it was just more about saying, look, Jim Houston called this game before, Gary Thorne called this game, Doc Emmerich, you're talking about 3 Hall of Fame broadcasters, guys who were the voice of hockey in America for the better part of the last 40 years. And then Jim Houston, who was, the voice of Hockey Night in Canada, for several years as well. And so in a real simplistic way, who the fuck is James Cybulski? You're not really a known commodity, especially from a play-by-play standpoint. So he, it was basically, look, there might be some blowback here. Can you handle that? People might be outraged. And I'm like, oh man, I put my big boy pants on. I got a thick enough skin to get my ass kicked or whatever. But and they said, okay, well, we just did a more of a simplistic audition, a little more play it straight and less about the fun that I was kind of doing that got me there in the first place. And they said, okay, we'll let you know in a week. And they were true to their word, because it was the longest week of my life. Like every phone call, every email, every text, you're just like, is this it? And I got the call from Sean Ram Jagsing a week later and just said, we'd like for you to be the voice. And, Tara, like I've been fortunate enough to, we've had a chance to experience life, right? And travel around the world to places I never thought I would ever see, thanks to work, and be fortunate enough to work with TSN and Sportsnet and so many live events and Stanley Cups and NBA finals. But that call, as somebody who, played video games a lot growing up, and to play that game too, and to be given the keys to the franchise, to be the voice, one of the coolest and one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had in my life. And like anything, like any job, when you spend so much time, yes, there are some days where you find out how sausage is made, but man, it beats working for a living. It's really cool. It's been a tremendous honor to be the voice for the last 5 years.
That's awesome. It's good to hear, and it's good to see good things happen to good people. I tell you,
what was your rating?
What's that?
What was your rating in the game?
It was pretty low. I think it had to be like 75. It was there.
Which now, like, that's the thing. Like, nobody's really got a low rating. Where in those days, in the mid 90s, like I think there was a guy, Ed Ronan.
There wasn't.
There were guys who had like 49, 50, like low ratings, right?
You're
Lyle
right.
Odeline had a low rating. Like there were some guys in those mid 90s games that I'm sure guys would have been pissed off going, what do you think? I'm playing in the NHL. Like, what do you?
I know. I have an idea, but it's wild. I would love to ask somebody how they came upon those ratings. I just wanted to be in it. I remember I was not quite at the very bottom. Maybe they took first round pick into it, and then maybe they went like some American League stats or something. But they had nothing to go by in the NHL, so I'm glad I was even just in it. But you know what I do now? I turn the play-by-play off until it's a big game, and then it adds more energy, and I pump the volume as loud as it can possibly go, and it feels like a playoff atmosphere. But you do a great job,
and that's what I thank you. I will say, like, that's the approach that I tried to take with the game, where I think going into it, they had a sort of expectation to where there was a baseline, in terms of calling the game, and then like more of an intense style that we'd do a bunch of different takes. But right from the get-go, when I started, I wanted to treat, like, to me, there's a bit of a salesperson to it as a play-by-play person. This is my interpretation. Now, other broadcasters might see this differently, but to me, you're selling a broadcast. Like, I know there are some broadcasters I can turn on the TV and I don't even have to see the score, but I know what the score is, or this game, whether it matters or not, if it's just by the tone of their voice, right? That they sound checked out or not. And so in the video game, to me, if you're playing the game, like, nothing else matters. Like, the most important thing in your life in that moment is that game, right? Because, even if you're parenting in that moment, you're still focused on the game, right? Like, so I try to treat every game like it's sort of a game 7 type
I like
approach. And so I like that intensity. That's what I kind of wanted, like, in terms of how I envisioned it. And so that's how I try to treat the game in terms of the approach. Like, hi, everybody. Welcome to EA Sports. My name is James Cybulski. We are ready to go. That sort of let's go, right? Like, you've been waiting all day for this. The power's on. I've waited for the load, and now it's time to drop the puck, right? Like, that sort of intensity that I like to try to bring to the game. And I
love that.
For the most part, people
exactly what I'm looking for as a consumer. I guess everybody's different, but for me, I want, like, because you're breaking from reality anyway, right? And let's do this without, the game is so perfect. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how do you sit there and say a bunch of quotes or phrases, or do you do you watch a game being simulated and you go by that? Is it organic, or like how does this happen?
So it's more just theater of the mind. So we'll have a loose script, often in terms of they call it filling buckets, if you will. And so our associate producer Danny Lopes, who kind of is a guy who steers me, keeps me on the tracks, he'll have a script ready to go and say, okay, we need to fill up 10 goal calls here, breakaway goals. So you're just basically painting a picture of reacting as you would call it, but you're basically calling a play that doesn't really exist, but you know the context from the game, right?
Okay.
So there's, you're doing everything almost as a stitch to where, okay, a puck, you're coming up the center ice, or you're coming up through the middle and you're sending it over to the right winger, or you're passing the puck over to the right side, right? So, you're finding a way to say 10 different ways, moves the puck to the right side, over to the right winger, moves the puck along the boards, right? Like, and so just all these different contexts where you're saying the same thing, but it's just slightly different. So it can just trigger in different ways. And then, steps across the blue line, across the line, gains the zone, into the offensive zone, right? Like, so it's just saying all these different ways. So you improvise it, and you're just trying to on the fly try to fill these up. And then you have some days where we call them phone book sessions, and I think we've got up to 5,000 names in the game now, where we don't just have the NHL names, where we have the NHL, we have the American League, we've got the CHL now, right, from right across the country. You got the East Coast League names, you've got names from over in Europe, and then just as the games become more and more multicultural, like you talked about what a dream it was getting in the game in the mid 90s. For me, as somebody, Cybulski wasn't the most common name growing up. I mean, it's certainly expanded as we've procreated through generations of Cybulskis now, but for me, like, unless I was getting to the NHL or a relative was getting to the NHL, like, Cybulski's not going to find its way into the game. And so, hey, one thing I was able to do is get my name in the game, right? And have it pronounced properly. And I can, put some other friends. And, I remember doing a blast out on social media a few years ago saying, hey, like, if anybody wants to, if you want your name in the game, send it to me and we'll just kind of put together a list. And, hundreds of responses from people that wanted their name in, and you just add more from the community. So I think that's kind of a neat way to kind of add those, but you have a day where you read off 1,000 names, right? And you just basically do a stitch like passes to Ryan, passes to Cybulski, passes to Bedard, passes to McDavid, passes to Draisaitl, and then you do a different version of like, great feed by Ryan, great feed by Cybulski, right? And so you have these stitches that you're filling buckets, right? So yeah, some days amazing. Are finding out how sausage is made. That's for sure.
Between all the many phrases that you use and names to like their precision in when you say it, it's so real. I can't compute how that's done. How something so small, like you said, it happens at the line. And if you just go slightly like horizontal across the line, east to west, then you'll go, oh, drags the line or whatever. And you're like, how does the game put this together so quick, I guess isn't impressive. It's a computer, but there's so many nuances that I didn't think could be captured in hockey. I can see easier in baseball. Yeah. To some degree, for example, because I play the MLB one, but it's wild. And so a credit to you and everybody at NHL. I hope at EA Sports, I hope someday they put Shoresy in there. Who knows? Maybe our team.
That's a great idea.
I think it's a decent idea. I think
there was. I know they did something with the Ducks with the 30th anniversary of the Mighty Ducks movie. Yeah. I think last year, I think Shoresy would be a great way to cross promote. So. You know what? Let me. There you go. Not that I have much stroke with the game, but let me at least run it up the flagpole or let people know that there would be at least an interest, because it feels like that would make sense.
It seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, just as there should be a roster with the Charlestown Chiefs in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you not have an opportunity to play with?
There
Reg
you go.
Dunlop
We're on to something. There's a little division, right? The Mighty Ducks, the Sudbury Blueberry Bulldogs, the Charleston Chiefs.
We had, so 5 years ago, we went down, you talk about, cross-pollinating and different things. We signed a deal with Snoop Dogg to be a guest commentator in the game for NHL
I remember
20.
that. Yeah.
And so they flew me down for 2 days to go work with Snoop in his production studios. And man, like what two of the coolest days of my life.
Talk about like just something that you talk about. We're of the same ilk growing up and everything.
Yeah.
I can't, like, how you found yourself into Snoop Dogg's studio. Like it must blow your mind. That's
It's amazing.
That would be a podcast in itself. Just unpack that. I mean,
you walk into this studio. So like the one thing that really stood out was the size of this production studio. Like there were multiple studios for like video production, right? Like these green screen rooms where they were all leased out. Like there were productions going on in all of them. And then there was like a radio studio, there was a music recording studio, and then there were lounges for days. Like there was a lounge that if you were going to bring grandma in and, a nice kind of tidy, very, like a living room sort of appeal. Then there was like a games room sort of lounge that was just, shuffleboard, pool tables, and
wow.
And everywhere you went, there was just that scent of cannabis, right? Like there was just this scent of cannabis. And so like Snoop would come, like he came in.
It's exactly what I would thought so far. Go ahead.
And he was everything, you know what? And for me, he was everything you would expect and more. He came in, I think the producers thought he was going to be, they had him signed and sealed and to do basically 9 to 5, 2 days, 9 to 5, 8-hour shifts. And we're just going to grind out these voice sessions, right? Well, I think Snoop kind of walked in a little after 11 the first day and, had a lot of handlers. And, I think we called it a day by about 2:30. And that was with a lunch session in between and probably, so like we probably got about like 2 hours of actual voice recording the first day and then probably more rinse and repeat the next day. But like he'd walk in and he's just puffing away. Right. And he just, smoking weed but it looked like it was a cigar. And, we had,
just and so huge blunt.
Yeah. And so it finally, like, you kind of, I think everybody was kind of like, man, this would be a dream come true if we could smoke weed with Snoop, right? But you don't want to, but you would never ask like, hey, let's do some shots with your booze, right? Like if it's tough to have a drink with somebody when you don't have any drinks, right? And so in this case, like we had flown down to California, we didn't have any weed, but like you kind of want to, so
yeah, of course.
I remember asking, he had his one buddy, and I remember saying, hey, listen, is there a place around here we can find some weed? And he said, yeah, you're in like the factory, man. I'm like, well, yeah, but like we just, after the game, we want to go watch the NBA finals. Like the Raptors were playing the finals that year and the game was on that night. They're playing Golden State. Like, yeah, just, maybe after dinner, just maybe, yeah. He's like, oh, okay, let me see if I can find you a joint or something like that, or a joint or two. Like, great. And so he comes back with like a little mint tin, like looks like, just a little mint tin. And we open it up and it's filled with like a dozen baseball bats in this thing. It was like, how could you even get that much in there? But but now it's like, okay, we've got something, right? And so anyway, come back after lunch and Snoop sits down and he's, lighting up again and pulling away. And I finally kind of like, I said, is that a cigar or is that a joint? Like I said, it looks like a cigar, but it smells like a joint. And he kind of just looks at me and he says, well, why don't you find out?
That's how.
Got hands over the joint, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm not saying no, right? Well, that's it. It's like, what are you gonna say? You say, well, we're working right now, so
I can't even. This is
and so passes the joint over, and it's like, all right, it's on like Donkey Kong now, right? And so I take a couple puffs. Now, I don't want to out anybody, but like other people are like, oh, yeah, I'm into it. And so now everybody's puff, pass in this studio and like everybody's now in the mood. And kind of hits about 5 minutes later, like, I can't believe this might be the most unprofessional thing I've ever done. Like,
But
smoking a joint while working, but this is the most incredible thing I might have ever done professionally.
you heard him smoke weed on Doggy Style in '93. You could hear him smoking weed, and now, all that time later, he's passing you one from the same sort of vicinity. I mean, California. I'm sure it's not the same studio, but what to me, that's it's surreal for that reason. Like hearing Gin and Juice and that whole album, and they take those interludes and they're smoking weed, and I'm like, now I'm here. What I do brings me, being you, has brought me here. What a wild place to bring somebody when it's so detached. It's a part of our. It's honestly, it's kind of like when I was in a couple of scenes, but the first one with Jason Momoa on Frontier, and I remember going like, this is beyond, like, there's so much to unpack with this. Yes, it's a cool experience, but there are so many. It's like time almost isn't linear for a second. It's just like, wow, like I can hear the breath of Snoop Dogg on these as he's puffing, and now I'm here in his studio.
Yeah. And like, honestly, he was the best because he's kind of like us. Like, he's a big sports fan. So we were talking about just everything, right? I was picking his brain about Half Baked with the Chappelle movie that he was in. And, the one thing that I think was a real icebreaker for him to kind of, all right, this guy's okay, was, he's a big Lakers fan, and, we were kind of just chatting, and I was just saying, like, I got into basketball as a kid because of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he was kind of like, really?
Yeah,
he said, I'm going to show you something later.
Yeah.
And well, it's funny because he said, I'm going to show you something later. And when we wrapped up at the end of the day, he left the studio, and I thought nothing of it. He was like, oh, okay, we'll see you tomorrow, whatever. And he came back 10 minutes later, and he had this little ring box, and he opened it up. He said, check this out. And he had bought 2 of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's all-star rings.
Unbelievable.
And one was from 71. That was Kareem's first, because that was also the year I think Snoop was born. He goes, he was born in 71. Then he had, I think, the 1985 ring, which was one of Kareem's last. So it was, the fact that, like, he remembered, he appreciated that. And so he went to kind of play a little show and tell, but you could see, like, the guy was still a fan, but just fun, quick as a hiccup, man. Like, yes, he was smoking weed all day, but did not miss a beat, like, just on it. For a guy who, kind of paints the picture as a, fast talking hustler and a stoner, he is a smart, incredibly successful businessman. And man, I had fun getting baked with him for 2 days.
That is one of the best stories I've ever heard on this podcast. And we've had 200 odd episodes.
I'll take that as a win.
Honestly, yeah, I just didn't expect it. I just did not expect you to go to Snoop Dogg. And I'd love, like, I got so much more. I want to know about the Olympics, the Gemini Award. Really, the breath. I mean, we're skipping over, like, you've done this, and you're a fairly young looking guy, really, I feel fairly, I don't want to say young for my age. Like Bill Maher says often, he's like, you look you try to look good for where you are in life. I'm not kidding anybody. I'm not 25, but I try to take care. It's the same way. And I think having a energy and passion for what you do and liking what you do might contribute to that. I'm sure that it helps mentally, and I can attest to that from firsthand experience. But it was great to have you on. There's so much more I want to ask, but maybe we can do a volume 2 in the spring. We're in the playoffs now. Maybe in the spring. We didn't even talk about the Oilers or anything. Not that that's why I had you on. But it's a minute. It's an hour and 15. I got to take off now. My daughter has soccer, as she does every day. It's been great having you on. Do you have anything else to plug or talk about before you?
The only thing I would say is I went to you're in St. John's.
Yes.
Yeah. I went once. I went once, took the family there in 2009 and went to O'Brien's on the whale watching excursion.
Yeah, great.
And I'll just say this for anybody that's watching, there was a gentleman who was a cab driver who drove us out there that morning and couldn't have been a nicer guy. And he remarked, you guys probably need a ride back to the hotel after this. We were staying at the Sheraton downtown, and he said, you guys will probably need a ride back. And we were like, yeah. He goes, we'll just call. He goes, oh, no, I'll wait. And so, out of the boat for 2 hours or so,
At least,
right?
yeah.
At least come
and
back.
it's a long drive. I'd say it's
And
a 40,
it's not a
40
short
minute
haul.
drive.
Yeah. It was probably, 40 minutes at least. And so he waited, drove us back. It wasn't that big a fare, right? Like, all things considered, compared to like Toronto or Vancouver prices and all that. And he dropped us off, and then he said, let me grab your address. He said, my wife's a painter. And anyway, 6 months later, we got a Christmas card from him and his wife, just saying, hey, it was a pleasure to drive you guys. And it was a hand-painted puffins. It was the most beautiful card I had ever received. And it just really, to me, encapsulated just how amazing people from the Rock truly are. So, Terry, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You guys are good people out there. And so
great story. We take pride in that. We people here like to be gracious hosts, and we love being Newfoundlanders, but we also love being part of Canada. And I think
took you long enough to join the country.
Well, I know, 49, right? I went to school. Trust me, I did folklore. I laugh at it sometimes, like when I tell stories. But I do have a folklore degree, and I was intrigued by all of that, about how, and I think for how we have a sense of unity. I think, unlike a lot of other places, and we love to host people and everything. And I think the unity for years and years and years, living on the edge of cliffs, it's a hard way to earn a living, especially before electricity. And you got to entertain yourselves. And we have so many different little, we've done it together. That's why there's so many songs and stories and so many storytellers. Great Big Sea are singing music, but they're also telling stories. And some of what they do is traditional.
Alan Doyle's the man.
Unique. Yeah, right. They're great. They're from a little tiny spot. Those guys, a couple of them got folklore degrees. And then when it comes to the hosting, I just think, we joined Canada late. Most people here, I mean, the vast majority are pumped to be part of Canada, but we love to be Newfoundlanders, and there's you can be proud to be both. But I think when people from the mainland, wherever they're from, come here, and we're still, we look at it, we still really want them to enjoy their time here, and it's almost like we got something to prove, but we enjoy proving it, kind of thing. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's just part of the culture here. If that goes anywhere, if that made any bit of sense, I think you kind of experienced it with the cab driver.
100%. Thanks for letting me do this. Let's do it again sometime.
No sweat.
You guys got to come back. You got to come back to clearing the crease, and or at least we'll find time to have a drink at some point.
Say the word, JC, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon. Our paths shall cross. I promise you that. Thank you for doing this. See you soon.
Take care, buddy.
See you, brother. Folks, if you're downtown St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, you want to go for a beer, you want to go for a good time, maybe you want to have a coffee, maybe a Diet Coke. Either way, check out George Street. If you're going to go to George Street, why not check out Trinity Pub, TJ's Pub, Rob Roy Confusion, Martini Bar, Green Sleeves, of course, the Bull and Barrel. If you're downtown, you want to get a bite to eat, check out Loose Tie, Blue on Water, or Merchant Tavern. If you're in the East End, of course, Wedgwood Cafe, Peter Wedgwood Cafe. They also do catering. You want to change your life. You want strength and balance for the body and mind. Look no further than Power Conditioning on Rope Walk Lane. You want to go to Mr. Lube? Check out Chris Sparks, Mr. Lube, 2 locations. Torbay Road, Kenmount Road. Live, laugh, lube. Pitbull Pain Relief, the pain sticks that just don't quit. Go to pitbullpainrelief.com, see what all the fuss is about. And, of course, True Hockey, take what's yours. This has been 210B, featuring the one and only James Cybulski. Thank you, James, and I'll catch you guys on the rebound. Thanks for listening.